morning, everybody. Hello, Colombian DOG. Welcome to our second review session. Students should be coming on. So we'll see how many come. I'm gonna go over some more problems today, talk about what to expect tomorrow. If you guys have any questions, just go ahead and post them. And we'll see them as they come in. Got about 30 seconds left. Okay, let me see. Here we got 11-ish students. More people. At least that's what my Twitch tells me. Okay. So your midterm is tomorrow. I'm gonna go over some recommendations on what to expect for tomorrow. It's probably the Wi-Fi. I mean, I don't think it's me. I don't think it's me. So if it's your Wi-Fi, I'm sorry. Yeah, if it's your Wi-Fi, I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. I mean, I don't know how I know Twitch is probably less bandwidth than like Zoom, but it is recorded, so hopefully anything you miss, you can go back and see. I'll post those videos as soon as possible. Okay, so the first thing I want to do right now is to go over my recommendations for tomorrow. So your midterm's tomorrow, as we all know. So I'm just going to talk through essentially what I recommend your process should be for tomorrow. So first things first, arrive early to your designated room. So your room assignment is based on your last name. We are in Cook 121 or NSC 205. So if your last name starts with A through O, go ahead and go to Cook 121. It's the bigger of the two rooms. It can handle more students. It's not an ideal room to take an exam on, take an exam in, but it's what we have, so it's what we gotta work with. So go there. If your last name is P through Z, then go to NSC 205. Which is a bit more ideal in the sense that it has the long desks, I think. So go to those two rooms. Make sure you show up early. My recommendation is 6:45 at the latest. That's just because there's a lot of students, and so we just have to manage sitting you down and make sure you're in the right spot. Ooh, good idea. Just manage getting into the right spot, make sure everything's sorted. It's definitely not the end of the world if you arrive later, but please arrive early. It'll just help in terms of making sure everybody's in the spot where they need to be. Bring the following items. So make sure you bring your laptop and your charger. I'm not guaranteeing that everybody's gonna have space for an outlet. In fact, most of you will not have access to an outlet, and that's gonna be a fun thing to manage. But make sure you bring your laptop, make sure you bring your charger. Make sure you bring your student ID as well, and then one-page cheat sheet. So I talked to the other instructors, and in terms of written work, we're letting you have 1 page of written work that you want to bring. That way you're not shuffling through all your papers. And this really is all you should need. So you can still have access to UB Learns, you can still have access to zyBooks, but your notes like on your computer, like your MATLAB files, your homework files, whatever you want from there. But anything written, just bring 1-page cheat sheet. It's a good practice anyway for you to do. If you want to bring a power strip, sure. I'll probably steal a few from my house. I'll ask my husband which ones I can steal. But if you want to bring a power strip, sure, that's totally fine. You can do that. I don't know where all the plugs are going to be. It's not, I don't know. We'll figure it out. I will be there early and start managing all of that fun stuff as much as I can ahead of time. But sometimes we're not really going to know the issues that are going to come up until you guys come as students. So that's why it's a good idea to arrive early. Okay, so arrive early, bring those things. Once you get into the classroom and you're seated down and you have everything ready, then go ahead and open up the midterm exam folder on UB Learn. It's on the midterm tab. You guys can technically see it now and read through the instructions. It's the same instructions that I posted under the review material. But you can reread through those instructions if you want. And then open up MATLAB and get all of your resources accessible. So if there are specific things that you want to have open on your computer, such as the homework solutions, or maybe you have a specific UB Learns page that you want to open, or a specific zyBooks chapter, whatever, I encourage you to open those up right away, make those accessible, and then also in your file structure, wherever you store your files, create a folder somewhere that you're gonna store all your midterm exam files. Make this your current folder in MATLAB. So if you look at my MATLAB right here, here's the folder that I created for the practice exam. So this would be essentially a folder that you create, and that should be your current folder to save everything in there. Just so you're prepared and you're ready. Your cheat sheet, sure, it can be digital, that's fine. Not a problem. It can also be paper, it can be typed, I don't care. I just want to make sure that you don't have all of your notes accessible to you and you're shuffling through paper. It should be what's on your computer, and one extra sheet that you might need. But it can be digital, that's fine, I don't care. If you have a physical MATLAB book, did you buy one? Sure, bring it. You shouldn't need it, but you can bring it. That's fine. Okay, so arrive early, bring all that stuff, sit down, get everything prepared. Keep in mind, you're also gonna have just your one screen. Like, you're gonna have just your laptop, so it's gonna be management in terms of what you're looking at, what you have open. So keep that in mind. I really strongly encourage you to create a cheat sheet to help condense everything, all the information you think you might need, into one small area. Because you're gonna have your homework, you're gonna have your midterm exam problems open, you're gonna have MATLAB open, and then anything else, which is gonna clutter your screen. Like, typically my desktop has 2 screens, and when I go down to a laptop, it's annoying at how little of a room I have. So just make sure you're keeping that in mind in terms of screen management. What you all want to have open. You cannot bring any other devices. So if you have notes on an iPad, transfer them to your computer. But you should not bring any other devices. You should have one laptop and one sheet of paper. That's a good question. Okay, so once all of that is settled, the exam starts at 7 p.m. Which means that at 7 p.m. you're going to refresh the UB Learns page that has the midterm exam link on it, and that will be released. It will be available to see. So you're going to open up your exam. When you open up your exam, you're going to be assigned 6 random problems. So you got 6 random problems. When I say problems, they are links to the problems on UB Box. So you should open up all of your problems right away. So click each link, open up a new tab. Okay, you should open up all your problems right away. So they're all accessible, they're all preloaded, and you're not having issues with that. So open up all of the problems. Another thing is the problem statements are technically true-false questions. And part of that's just the limitations on UElearns. I can't create a question that doesn't have an answer to it. The true-false has no impact on your grade whatsoever. It does say that click true once you've completed the question. You can do that. You don't have to do that. I don't care if you do it, but don't pay attention to the true-false if it's just going to distract you. It has no impact whatsoever on your grade. I just want to warn you that the true-false question will be there. So open up your exam, and then you'll open up all of your questions right away. So all of your links. You have 6 links, open them all up, A through F. Okay, that'll take like a minute. After that is when you start to actually answer your questions. Here is my recommended strategy for taking the exam and answering the questions. Okay, so you have 2 hours to do the exam, which means if everything goes smoothly, that's 120 minutes to program 6 questions. You have no more than 20 minutes per question. I do want to mention that you have 6 questions. They are not necessarily in order of difficulty. It's not necessarily in order of how we covered the material in class. They are just 6 questions. Feel free to glance at each question one at a time before you determine which one to approach. I don't care how you do that. Just keep in mind they are not in order of difficulty. Okay, so you have 120 minutes. Give yourself no more than 20 minutes to answer each question. My recommendation, to maximize points, to maximize partial credit, I recommend you answer each question first and then go back and debug and fix any errors. So I recommend you answer each question and don't even run your code. I recommend you don't even run your code. Okay, if you're worried about time, don't even run your code until you've answered all the questions. Then if you have more time, go back, run your code, debug it, fix any errors. And the reason for this is because I really don't want you to get stuck on any one question and not have time to answer some questions. We've all been there with debugging, where you're sitting there and you're trying to fix this error and you've lost 30 minutes just trying to fix one small error because you simply couldn't see a tiny mistake. I would hate for that to happen to you on the midterm. You're not going to have test files. You're not going to have necessarily what the answers are going to be. And part of that is because I have a limited amount of time in my life, so I didn't want to write all the test files. Another part of it is I don't want you to sit there and click, like, I wanted to get all the points. I want to get all the points. Because you do that for your homework, and sometimes you're sitting there and it takes you forever to do your homework. You don't have forever to do the midterm. You have 120 minutes to do 6 small questions. So I want to make sure that you get through all the questions. Don't get stuck on one question. Don't waste time trying to fix one error when you have 4 more questions that you need to answer. So answer each question first, then go back and debug and fix errors. There's plenty of opportunity for partial credit. So if your code does not work perfectly, if your code doesn't work at all, you will still get some points, and I want to make sure you get as many points as you can. Another thing, your test link just has the true-false questions and the links to the box folders. Once again, the true-false questions, you can ignore them. The instructions say click true when you finish answering the question. You don't have to. It's no impact on your grade whatsoever. The whole goal of the exam link is to give you access to the 6 UB box files that you're going to need to answer. Your submission link is just like your homework. So you're going to have a separate submission link, not for each question, but one submission link for the whole exam. You are going to submit all your files to that link. You have unlimited submissions, so you can submit your files at any time, as many times as you want. Make sure your last submission has all of your exam files in it. So if you want to submit your files one at a time when you finish them, sure, that's fine. Just make sure your last submission has all of your files. So you can have unlimited submissions as many times as you want. Just make sure you contain all of your files. Another thing, the instructions say you submit as a zip file. I don't care if you submit as a zip file. I really don't. You can submit just like your homework, and that's totally fine with me. All I care is that I have your files. If you do want to submit as a zip file, what you do is, so let's say all of your files are in your folder. You can see that folder in your current folder on MATLAB. You can right-click it and say Create Zip File. I don't know if that's also the case on a Mac. I am not as well versed on a Mac. It might be a little bit different. But that's how you can submit just a zip file. But once again, I don't care as long as I get your files. I don't care if they're zip files. I don't care if they're separate separate files. As long as they're all submitted to the same final submission link. Just like it is in your homeworks, you will be told what to name your files. So if you're creating a function, it needs to be the same name as the function. If you're creating a script file, it will tell you explicitly, create a script file named yada yada. Make sure you name it correctly. Okay, that is my recommendations for taking the exam. Once you're done with the exam, you'll submit everything, you'll pack up your stuff, and then you're gonna go to the front of the room and sign the sign-out sheet. You'll show your student ID, sign the sign-out sheet, so we can make sure that you are who you say you are. And that is how it's gonna go. Keep in mind, most of you guys are probably gonna be there the entire 2 hours. So it might get a bit cluttered at the end of the exam. So just be patient. You will get out of there eventually. So just be patient. The TAs will be grading the exams. We're having a grading party. I will be there. Myself and the TAs are having a grading party this Saturday. Woohoo! Who doesn't want to spend their Saturday grading exam? So we will be grading them together. Myself and the TAs. It's gonna be a party. It's gonna be great. Keep in mind though, we're grading them on Saturday, but you won't get the grades back probably for a week because we need to make sure that everybody has taken the exam, and if anybody has, if they have to take the makeup, it might take a couple days into next week to get all of that, the peripheral people to take the exam. Okay, so that is my recommendations for taking the midterm. I will send this, I'll post this on UbiLearns, just so you guys can reference it. But it should give you a general idea about what to expect, how to conduct yourself. Obviously modify it to you, but this is my recommendation for how to approach the midterm. Okay, so let's go ahead and move into more topics of review. So on Monday, we talked about loops, for loops, while loops, we talked about logical indexing, we talked about branching. Those were the top 3 topics that students wanted to review. The topics after that kind of got a little bit more all over the place. People generally want to talk about input-output, modifying arrays, and solving system equations. I'm going to focus on those 3 for our review. Beyond that, people didn't really want, like, functions and basic calculations weren't really on the top of people's lists, but we'll see how much time we have for review. Another thing, a student in the last section asked me to post these files on UbiLearns. I will do that after class. So I'll post these review files after class. Okay, so input-output. This is, I call it input-output. It's called managing data in MATLAB. It's week 5 material. I call it input-output because it's analogous to other languages. But this is the week where we talked about the input function. We talked about fprintf, we talked about display, we talked about load and save. Load and save are not on the midterm, so don't worry about those. You'll do them in your project. Okay, so I talked about keywords on Monday. I'm going to continue that concept throughout today. So some keywords, when we're talking about prompting or user-defined, that indicates that we're going to use input, that we're going to ask the user for some information. I will talk about that hardcore for Annie. So prompt, user-defined, all of those keywords indicate we're going to use input. If we have keywords that say print out, display with X digits past the decimal, text with variable values, variable, like values stored in variables. We're looking at fprintf. If we're talking about printing out, displaying with a specific format, such as format short G, if we're talking about displaying just text or just a single variable, we're talking about display. So these are the three main functions that I'm going to focus on because you'll see them. Sometimes you're going to be told explicitly which function to use. We might say use the display function or use the fprintf function. If you're told which one to use that. But if not, you can choose whichever one you want to use. Okay, so here is once again, a very basic problem. Your problems on the exam are going to be more fleshed out. So this is just a basic example. So here it says prompt the user for the last value in a vector. Prompt the user means we're going to use input. Whenever you use input, it's always variable equals input and then your prompt. So whatever you type. You're not necessarily going to be given what a prompt is going to be, so just come up with your own. Don't make it worse than it needs to be. You could literally just type input. It doesn't matter. But it's always one variable equals input, and then whatever your prompt is. Okay, I'm expecting a number, so I can just leave it here. If you are expecting text, don't forget your S option. Okay, so keep in mind, this is what it is if you're expecting text. This is what it looks like if you're expecting just a number. But either way, it's one variable equals input. Okay, I'm expecting a number, so I don't need the S. Okay, so that's my input. Then it says print out the following message. The last value to be used is XXX. Okay, I'm not told explicitly which one to use for this, so I can go ahead and choose which one that I want to use. This message here combines both text and data. Anytime you combine text and data, my preference is to use fprintf. I will show you with both. But if I was to use fprintf, I would type fprintf and then quote, the last value to be used is, and then I'm inserting some data. So I use the percent and then I'll do 0.0f, okay, to indicate that it's a 0 digits past decimal point, floating point number. It's my favorite way to type out integers. I could use %d. Either way. So Hardcore Franny had a good question. When it comes to exact output, it does not have to be exact on the exam. If you are told to output something, it will show you what your message should look like. It will show you what your output should be. But if you misspelled value, you wouldn't really get points off. I'm going to tell the graders to be more relaxed on that. So don't worry too much about spelling. Don't worry too much about spacing of your tables. It's really about, okay, can you use the fprintf function at its core versus can you align everything exactly? So I will tell the TAs to be a little bit more relaxed in terms of how things are printed out, and you're not going to get graded on your spelling. On your homeworks, we can do that because you have time to change it, and we give you exactly what it should look like. But for your midterm, we're not going to take points off. Okay, so last thing I need in fprintf is this variable here. So I'm inserting data. That data is coming from my V. That's what it looks like with fprintf. Personally, I think fprintf is easier to do this. If you want to use display, which is also valid because you're not told exactly what you want to do, it would look like this. You would create a new array where you're combining text and text. So the last value to be used is, and then string to number B. So that's what it looks like for display. And I'm not ignoring your question, but I'm not focusing on it right now. Re-ask it. If I don't get to it at the end, re-ask it. So number, let's say 5. Woo-hoo. Input must be a character vector or a string scalar. Num to string. I used the wrong function. My bad. Number 5. So there we go. This is what it looks like for fprintf. This is what it looks like for display. Once again, they're the same. Same what it looks like in my command window. Different ways to do it with fprintf versus display. Okay, then it says create a vector from 0 to a user-defined value with 5 numbers. Anytime you're asked to create a vector, we should be thinking colon operator or linspace. Here I am given my start value, my end value, and the number of values. That's an indicator you should use linspace. If you are given the start value, the end value, and the spacing, you should use the colon operator. But this one, I'm going to use linspace. So vec equals linspace 0, v, 5. Okay, so my start is 0, my end is v, and 5 values. Then it says calculate the square root of each value in the vector. So square root equals square root vec. There we go. A very, very, very basic example. Not that complicated. It's really just an illustration that I put together. Keep in mind, anytime we do mathematical operations, so technically I'm doing math operations here, you should be thinking in the back of your mind, am I working with scalars? Am I working with vectors? Do I want to do matrix math? Do I want to do element by element math? Your math functions always operate element by element. Okay, so this is automatically going to do element by element on all the values in my vector. Then it says display the results in a table. It doesn't tell me which one to use. I'm going to show you with both of them, but pay attention to what it says in your document. Okay, so using display. Whenever we're printing out data in a table using display, we're going to display our first line. So disp, and then whatever you want your first line to be, original, and then square root. Once again, I'm not going to worry too much about the spacing here. I'm not going to worry too much about the spacing. If you have time, go back and fix your spacing. If not, ignore it. If you're told to print something out, it will tell you what it should look like. Don't bother with literally counting the spaces too much. Okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and display my values. When you're using display and you're displaying numbers from your variables, you want to identify what format you're going to use. So we will tell you which format to use if we tell you to use display. So format short G is a good general one to use. And then I'm going to display my values. So anytime you're displaying values with disp, you want to go ahead and create a new array where the new array is filled with the numbers exactly the way you want to see them on the screen. So if I want the first column to show my original values, I'm going to put my original values as the first column. So vec transpose. Right now it is a row. I want it to be transposed. If I want my second column to be the square root values, then I'm going to do square root in my second column. So they're transposed as well. So let me go ahead and type this out. And there we go. See, it's not perfectly aligned here, but don't worry about that. You're not going to have points taken off because things aren't perfectly aligned. If you have time, go back and fix it. Okay? But that's if you have time. And there we go. So this is the first value, or the first set of numbers in my array, and the second set of numbers in my array. That's what it looks like for display. For fprintf, it's similar-ish. So fprintf, you type out exactly how you want the first line to be. Don't forget, for fprintf, you need your \n. For display, you don't need a \n. It's automatically entered in. For fprintf, you need it. And then you're going to identify exactly how you want each column to look like. So this first column, I want it to be, 10 spaces wide and 2 digits past the decimal point. For this second column, I want it to be 10 digits wide again and maybe 4 digits past the decimal point. \n. So you have a set of numbers for every column. How wide do you want it to be? How many digits past the decimal point? What type of character? Then you're going to go ahead and you're going to take your data, combine it into one array where your columns are going to be rows. So essentially it's display whatever your array you had up here transposed. So here is your relationship between your vector to display with disp versus your vector to display with fprintf. They are the same, but the fprintf one is transposed. So if you think about it that way, that's fine. Okay, let me go ahead and show it again. So here it was, here's what it looks like with display, here's what it looks like with fprintf. Hey, they're not badly aligned there. Woohoo, go me. Once again, don't worry too much about alignment. Get something down first. If you have time, go fix it. Okay, that is input, output. Those are the things to focus on. The input function, display function, and fprintf. Here's a review of those. Okay, moving into arrays. So another topic that students wanted was relatively towards the top was array manipulation. So this is literally week 2 material. So keywords. Keywords would be modifying an array, modifying columns, changing columns in an array, changing rows in an array, appending arrays together. So we're literally looking at it. What do we want to change? Goes on our left-hand side. And what do we want to put there? Goes on our right-hand side. These ones tend to be a bit more confusing for students. They don't always necessarily make as much sense. I do have those supplementary videos back that I made in like week 4 that go over some of this material. So if you want to, go back and look at those videos. I go over homework 3 in those videos. So you can use those as a reference and more study material if you want. Okay, so this one says write a function, so we'll talk about functions, that takes in 3 inputs, an array of arbitrary size, a number corresponding to a row, another number corresponding to another row, and returns the input array where the first row is divided by the values in the second row. Okay, so I don't want to call these R1, I'm going to call them X and Y. It was confusing me last semester, or last hour. Okay, so I'm gonna write a function. So I need function, and every function has an end. A lot of you guys don't write the ends in the functions, and MATLAB doesn't yell at you when it is a function file, but it is very good practice. So make sure, the yawning's back. Make sure you have an end with each function, make sure you have an end with each if, make sure you have an end with each switch, make sure you have an end with each for, make sure you have an end with each while. Okay, so here's my function. I have one output, so I can go ahead and type that in. One output, we'll call it A out. It's an array, so A out. And then you will be told explicitly what your function name should be. You'll be told explicitly what your inputs are going to be, what your outputs are going to be, just like you see for your homework documents. So A out, whatever your function name is, and then A in. So the first one is an array of arbitrary size. When it says arbitrary size, that means it can be a 2x2, it can be a 3x7, it can be a 6x9. It can literally be any size. It doesn't matter. And then this is a number corresponding to a row in the array, and another number corresponding to a row in the array. Keep in mind, when we write functions, we typically have to write our help text lines. You're going to be writing several functions for your midterm exam. I don't know if it's I can't remember if it's 3 or 4. But anytime you're writing a function, you should check to make sure you have to write H1 lines. Some of them you're going to have to write them, some of them you aren't. Your H1 line is literally the name of your function, and then a short summary of what it does. Then you would type in your use cases. So your use case is literally how to call your function, which if you've noticed by now, it's literally just this, where A in, X, and Y would have values. Then you type in your inputs, and you type in your outputs. So you will not be explicitly graded on your comments unless you are told explicitly you have to have them. So for your functions, make sure you pay attention to whether or not you need them. If it says that you need H1 and help text lines, you need these 4 things here, and you're going to have points associated with them. If you aren't told explicitly, then you don't need them. I did talk about on Monday how you can use comments to kind of fill in some gaps to help give context to your code. So if your code's not working, you can add some context with a comment that the TAs can use. And yes, this class is recorded. It's going to be available on UB Learns. It's going to be loaded to my YouTube page. You will have access to it. You can come back and watch it on Twitch for the next 2 weeks. So you will have access to this lecture, just like you have access to all the lectures. Okay, so that's my little ditty on comments. Okay, so write a function that takes in 3 inputs, an array of arbitrary size, a number corresponding to a row in the array, another number corresponding to a row in the array. The output is going to be the input array where whatever this row is replaced and divided by this row. First things first, my output needs a value. So a lot of you guys have seen the error that says output argument blah 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 might not be assigned. So output n might not be assigned. That means you didn't say n equals anything. So here I'm going to say a out equals a in. So at minimum, my output array is going to be the same as my input array. It's not, it shouldn't be, but at least now I know that a out starts as a in. Okay, and I mean a out is going to be the input array with some slight modifications. So a out equals a in. That's the first thing I can say. Now I need to go ahead and say, okay, what do I want to change and what do I want to change it to? So I'm going to go ahead and change the array where this row is divided by this row. For your functions, with something like this, an example would be given. Go ahead and use that example to help dictate what your code looks like. So let's say a in looks like this. And that x is row 1 and y is row 2. Use your example. Type in what those values should be. So my output, a out, should be this array here where row 1 is divided by row 2. So in code, I need to go ahead and replace row 1 by dividing it with row 2. So I would say a out, I'm changing row 1, so 1 colon. So I'm changing row 1, all the columns, equals row 1 divided by row 2. Keep in mind, anytime you use mathematical operations now, you need to be thinking, do I have scalars? Do I have arrays? Do I want to do matrix math? Do I want to do element by element math? For this one, I want to do element by element. So I've started by just looking at an example. So start with the example. That's fine. It will give you some credit if you just do the example. But you don't want to leave it with the example. You want to go ahead and replace your variables, your values, with your variables. Okay, so in this example, x was equal to 1. So I can go ahead and replace x with 1. And y was equal to 2, so I can go ahead and replace 2 with y. Once you have some code in a function, keep in mind, if you do get to the point where you can test it, you can't just run your function. You have to call your function. Okay, so in your command window, I can't call this because it's not the same as my file name, but I'm going to go ahead and change the name to arrays so I can call it. And then here we go. So here's my original array, here's my x value, here's my y value. X was 1, y was 2. So I replaced row 1 by dividing it with row 2. So I took 8 divided by 10 to give me the 0.8. 1 divided by 9 to give me the 0.111 repeating. 7 divided by 8 to give me the 0.875, and 4 divided by 7 to give me the 0.57143. The example, use it as a reference to give you an indicator of what your code should do. If all you do is program up the example, that's fine. At least you have something written down on paper. Another thing to keep in mind, this is a pretty small function, so we can add in some checks and balances for this as well. So x and y are row values in your array, so we can go ahead and check to make sure that x and y are valid row values. Obviously, we can't have x and y be less than 0 or less than 1, really, or greater than 3. So we can add in some checks and balances to check to make sure that our inputs are valid. So when we're talking about that type of concept, we're looking at branching. And branching, like I said on Monday, it's hard to really dig in and point all the keywords that correspond to branching because it's really just anytime you need to make a decision. So if I'm deciding whether or not x and y are valid inputs, I need to use a branching statement. But the whole description I said before that did not contain any of the keywords that might correspond to branching. So branching is one of the harder ones to recognize when you might need to use it. So I need to go ahead and check to see if, well, no, first of all, let me figure out how many rows there are in A. So number of rows would be the size function, a in, and then 1. One of many ways to use the size function, but I need to somehow determine how many rows a in has. Then I can go ahead and check to make sure that x is a valid row number and y is a valid row number. So I can check to see if x is greater than 0 and x is less than or equal to the number of rows. And same thing with y. Y is greater than 0 and y is less than or equal to the number of rows. And every if has an end. So now here I can check to make sure that if I have an invalid set of x and y values, so let's say x is -1 and y is 10, it's going to give me, in this instance, my original array. We can go ahead and add an else here and say that a out equals -1. It really just depends on how the problem is stated and what your output should be. Okay, so here, just like in your homework, I used -1 in your homework as an indicator that's an invalid inputs. So here I can check to see, are they valid inputs? If they are, do this. Otherwise, a out is -1. So this is something that you might see. This is really a review on functions, array manipulation, and branching, really. So this is a good indicator of the types of things that might be grouped together to develop a problem. It's hard to do it with just one topic, so typically you see small pieces of many topics. Okay, that is arrays. Let's move on to solving systems of equations. So there's a problem in your practice exam that goes over this as well. I think in the practice exam, I put together a 7x7. I put together a big one. I think it's a 7x7 or something. I've done something smaller here, but the process still holds, regardless of how many equations you have. Okay, so like I said before, anytime we're doing math operations, we should be asking ourselves, am I dealing with scalars? Am I dealing with vectors? Do I want to do matrix math? Do I want to do element by element math? Most of the time, that answer is element by element. However, if you are asked to solve a system of equations, that is our indicator that says, I want to do matrix math. So this is a good indicator that we want to do matrix math. So hardcore Franny, that's a good question. Use the practice exam as an indicator of the complexity. Usually it's going to be, so it's hard to isolate things completely when it comes to programming. Like, we all need to know the basics in order to do anything else. So you'll see the basics in every single problem. But generally it combines 2 or 3 topics. So maybe functions with array manipulation, or branching. You might see branching combined with input-output, or logical indexing combined with array manipulation by concatenating arrays together. Loops might be combined with, so here I combine loops with input-output and basics. So this is an indicator of the types of problems you might see. Most of them, they're not long. Generally, you can see here that this is, 14 lines of code, and 4 of them are comments. So you're really looking at mostly 10 lines of code, but use the practice exam as a good indicator about what to expect in terms of complexity. Your homework problems are far too complex to do for a midterm problem. So use the practice exam as a reference. Okay, so solving system equations. Anytime you are asked to solve a system of equations, we are going to enter in, so type in the A values. Your A matrix. This is your matrix of coefficients. Then you're going to type in your B matrix. This is your constants from your right-hand side. After you do that, then you're going to go ahead and solve for x. And it's always this line of code, x equals A left divide B. Name your variables what you want. But that is that is essentially your process. It's just really 3 lines of code. Type in your A values, type in your B values, solve for X. And obviously, your problem would be a little bit bigger, but this is the key things in terms of when it says solve the system of equations. So for this matrix, for this system, I would say A equals, and A is just a matrix. Identify your unknowns, X, Y, and Z. For this problem, it's X, Y, and Z. You know why? Because I got lazy and it's easier to type X, Y, and Z. Okay, for other problems in your homework, you typically see X1, Y1, X1, X2, X3, or you see I1, I2, I3, etc. Whatever, it doesn't matter what your unknowns are called. But those correspond to the columns in A. And then each row corresponds to a new equation. So equation 1, equation 2, and then equation 3. So here we go. My X value in equation 1 has a 1 in front of it. My Y in equation 1 has a 1 in front of it. My Z in equation 1 has a 0 in front of it because it doesn't exist. For equation 2, my X has a 0 in front of it. My Y has a 1 in front of it. My Z has a -1 in front of it. Don't forget your semicolons, because I forgot. Okay, for equation 3, my X has a -2 in front of it. My Y has a -1 in front of it. And my Z has a -3 in front of it. There we go. There are my A values. Then you have your B values. B equals, and name your variables whatever you want. You don't have to call them A and B. Call them coefficients, call them constants, whatever you call them. But my B values are going to be 11, -1, and 19. Keep in mind, your B needs to be a column. Right now I have it as a row. So you either enter in semicolons or you transpose your row. Here we go. There's A and there's B. It should look like that. Then X equals A left divide B. This is the same every time. Same every time. There we go. There's my X values. That's what that problem should look like. And there might be obviously more combined with it, but that is the crux of solving a system of equations using MATLAB. Type in your A values, type in your B values, solve for X. That's it. And then do whatever else the problem tells you to do. There's an example in there's a practice example. Okay, I'm gonna skip over functions because I already reviewed them. I do want to go over this basics one. So here's just some basics. I just want to go over some brief things about typing in equations. So here it says calculate the following equation for X values between 0 and 100 and Y values between -100 and 0. So I'm going to go ahead and create my X vector. My start value is 0. My end value is 100. I'm going to use the colon operator. So for the colon operator, we start at 0, we end at 100. My spacing, let's say it's a spacing of 5. Okay, your spacing would be given to you in your problem statement. So keep that in mind. But if you're given a spacing, you want to use the colon operator. For my Y values, it's going to be -100 is my starting value. 0 is my ending value. And then I'll also do a spacing of 5. So here we can see my X values and Y values in my workspace. I can see they are both a 1/21, which is important because when I calculate Z, they need to be the same length. So Z, I'm going to do this calculation. So 0.6 times X cubed times, here it says E raised to something. This is not MATLAB syntax. A lot of you guys get confused when it comes to E raised to a power. Anytime we're doing E raised to a power, we need to do the EXP function. So I can't do E caret, I need to use EXP. And it's going to be -0.47 times Y. Keep in mind, whenever you're doing multiplication, you need your asterisk. Otherwise, it's going to give you an error. You can't say 0.47Y, you have to say 0.47 times Y. Plus 1.5 times Y squared times another EXP, -0.6 times X. Like I said many times, you're doing mathematical operations. So do you have scalars? Do you have vectors? Are you doing element by element? Are you doing matrix math? For this one, I'm doing element by element. So I put a period in front of all of my asterisks, in front of all of my carets, and in front of all my division signs. You don't need them in front of all of them. You don't need this one. You don't need this one. You don't need this one, and you don't need this one. And as you get more exposure and get more practice, you'll see which ones you don't need. But I would hate for you to have an instance where you didn't do that. You didn't put them in front of all of them on your midterm and you got points off because it didn't work. Or you got points off because you missed one. Okay, so here we go. There's my values. I can run it, there's no arrows. If I want to display my answers, I can display X next to Y, next to Z, transposed. There we go, there's my answers. Another thing to keep in mind, other functions you might see, trig functions. You have sine and cosine, tangent. If you have those, there's two different versions, depending on whether or not you have degrees or radians. If you have degrees, you would use sine d, cos d, tan d. If you have radians, you would use the normal one. Also keep in mind, log functions. Log corresponds to natural log. Log 10 corresponds to log base 10. Okay, I think I covered it all. I got it. So, Ren asked me what to focus on for your cheat sheet. Your problems are not copy-paste. They're not copy-paste. You have to look at a problem and you have to write code to solve the problem. So what I would recommend you write down is you focus on writing your syntax. What does an if statement look like? What does a switch statement look like? Write down your keywords. So if you see the keyword, nope, that's a bad example. If you see the keyword repeat or iterate, that means use a loop. If you see do not use loops, focus on logical indexing. So write down really what I talked about in these comments up at the top. Focus on your syntax. What is your syntax supposed to look like? Because it's not copy-paste. You're not necessarily going to find a homework that looks exactly the same. So focus on those kinds of concepts to write down on your cheat sheet. In reality, your cheat sheet is all you should need. You shouldn't need to be going through lots of documentation on your computer. If you did your cheat sheet right, if you studied right, really doing anything else isn't really going to help that much. Okay, so I will stick around and answer any more questions if you want. Other than that, I will see you guys tomorrow. I'll be there with a mask on. I'm not going to spend too much time next to people, but I'll be there with a mask on. It's been a whole week. So I will see you guys. I would hate to miss your midterm. And it'll be great. It'll be great. So I'll stick around if anybody has any questions. Other than that, good luck. Okay, I'll see y'all tomorrow.